You've probably already seen plenty of examples of the new gyro stabilization for the Pocket Cinema cameras. And if you own one of those cameras, you've probably already tested it. So today I'm just going to tell you, here are some top tips for getting the best results. Throughout this video, I will be showing a few examples of the stabilization in action, but it really is about how to get the best results rather than showing examples of how it can work, because it is really quite impressive. It can almost be used like a gimbal, but there are certain things you need to be aware of so you know what the limitations are and how to get those best results. First off, if you want to get gimbal-like results, you're going to have to walk like as if you are using a gimbal. The actual movement you make with your feet and how much the camera bounces up and down is going to make a huge difference to the end result that you're going to be able to get from using the gyro stabilization. Make sure you use that heel-toe sort of technique where you smooth out all the bumps as you walk. If you just walk normally, it's going to be really, really bad. Second up, shutter speed makes a huge difference to how good the final image looks. We all know about the 180-degree shutter rule and how you should really stick that to give it a cinematic look. Well, in this case, you really actually want to avoid that. Yes, it can work if you're only using a very small, slow movement, in which case there isn't much motion blur going on anyway. However, when you want to do more extreme stabilization, you really do need the least amount of shutter speed possible. The higher the shutter speed, the better the results you're going to get, as you're not going to have odd motion blur going in the wrong direction, which you're going to notice if you shoot at the traditional 180-degree shutter. So I would recommend going up to 75-degree shutter just to make sure you got a nice clean image to work with so the gyro can do the best results it can. There are ways to add motion blur back into the image in DaVinci Resolve, so it's best to do that and add it as a post technique rather than trying to capture a cinematic image straight in camera if you're planning on using the gyro stabilization. Not a big surprise, but shooting at a higher frame rate is obviously going to massively help make the footage look smoother. It does anyway with normal handheld and no stabilization, so of course it's going to improve things even further if you're pairing it with the gyro stabilization. Basically how all this works is it's all about having the maximum amount of data available for the software and the stabilization to really kind of maximize the quality that you can get from it. So of course, things like a cleaner image from a higher shutter, a higher frame rate for more frames to work with, and of course a higher resolution are all going to help with the gyro stabilization and getting you the best results. The crop factor is going to be massively affected by how much rotation is going on in the camera. So of course, if you're going to be twisting the camera a lot and then you try and stabilize that, it's going to have to crop very heavily to make that look a lot smoother. So the answer here is to really make sure you've got your horizon levels actually turned on the camera. They make a huge difference and are really, really helpful. I'd recommend this all the time anyway to leave them on. I think they're just handy to have just to make sure that things are looking straight on the camera, especially if you're doing real estate, for example, where you want to make sure all the lines look upright. In case you're wondering how to turn the horizon level on, well, it's actually in the menu in that top left-hand corner of your screen. So just go on there, and as you can see in the center, there are options for turning on things like crosshairs as well as the horizon level. Next up, of course, is taking account that there will be a crop of your image. So when you're shooting, you want to shoot a little bit wider than you perhaps normally would to give the gyro stabilization room to stabilize. Now, of course, if you're using digital stabilization, well, that often uses warping to try and, correct the image. And that's the reason why it can use more of the image, but it can look a bit strange sometimes. With gyro stabilization, it's not doing that. It's using the data from the camera, from the movement of the sensors, and then literally moving the image to match what the level should be. If you're planning on using the gyro stabilization, say for recreating a gimbal shot, then I highly recommend turning on the markers that let you add a frame around the edge of the image. This kind of gives you a nice guide of like how much of the image you want to sacrifice for stabilization. And it's really cool that Blackmagic have included this. Once again, you go into that menu in the top left-hand corner, and as you can see there, you've got the marker options where you can pick the amount of percentage that you want to crop on the image. You can set this to whatever you like. It has no effect on your final recording. It's just a nice guideline to give you an idea of what you're getting. I would say it's probably worth having at least a 90% marker crop on your screen, so it just gives you an idea of perhaps what could get lost around the edge of the frame. It then means if you frame your image within those markers, it means it's unlikely that you're going to lose the image when it comes to the stabilization. Now, finally, if you're using a manual lens, you're going to need to set the lens focal length in the lens data. This is quite a straightforward thing. You just swipe across on the screen and that goes across to your project settings. And then along the top there, you can see you've got lens data. It may have another one already in there. You can press on the reset lens data button and that will clear everything out. And then you can just click on the lens focal length and change it to the focal length of your manual lens. It does have the option to add a millimeter onto the text there. I don't know if that's really required or not, but I think it's probably worth doing because it does appear when you use a lens with lens data that gets transmitted into the camera. If you don't have the correct focal length recorded in there, then the gyro is going to mess up. It isn't going to do the correct stabilization because it may apply a much stronger stabilization or a much weaker stabilization depending on what focal length it thought your lens was. Now, if you're using a photography zoom lens, it will automatically change the focal length as you zoom in and out. However, if you're using, of course, a manual zoom lens, then that isn't going to happen. And that could be one big negative of using manual cinema zoom lenses and then trying to pair it with the gyro data. That isn't going to work as, of course, as you zoom in and out, the lens data isn't going to be updated. So there you go. They are my top tips for getting the absolute best out of the gyro stabilization in the Pocket Cinema cameras. This is an awesome update. It provides some excellent results, but you just need to know where and when it's going to work and what settings to get the best results from them. If you found this video useful, please like and subscribe as it massively helps me out. Thank you very much for watching and I will see you next time. Goodbye.